All right, welcome to our WinMBNA webinar. Before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping before I turn it over to
Yeah,
Abby.
Mom, may I help you?
If you are not speaking, if you wouldn't mind keeping yourself on mute so that we can limit background noise. There's going to be quite a few of us here. We want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to participate in the discussion. So down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see there's a React button. If you click on that, there's a raise hand. And that's a great way for Christine and I to know that you're ready to jump into the conversation. If there's a lot of us talking, feel free to raise your hand and then we'll call on people as they pop up. Also, feel free to use the chat your questions or comments if you don't want to speak out loud, and we'll monitor that as well. So now I will turn it over to our WinMBNA president, Abby Metcalf, to get us started. Abby?
Thank you, Kim. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. I'm excited for today's conversation about the impact of do-it-yourself culture on the monument industry. Sorry about my phone, I can't control it there. Leading our conversation today is Christine Baukamp. She's a CM. Christine is a seasoned memorial consultant, project manager, and cemetery liaison at Patton Monument Company in Michigan. With over 2 decades of experience in the industry, Christine has demonstrated exceptional expertise in memorial design and project management, highlighted by her recent achievement of becoming a certified memorialist from Monument Builders of North America. Currently serving as the Director of Marketing and Business Development at Patton Monument Group, Christine brings a wealth of knowledge and dedication to her role, fostering strong connections within her community and driving innovative solutions in the memorialization field. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you, Abby. Thanks everyone for coming today. An informed discussion is kind of a tough thing. If you've never been part of one before, tough for this format. In person, they're wonderful, but we can think about it as coming together to just share our ideas about a particular subject. Today, our subject is the do-it-yourself culture. And so, again, if you've never been part of something like this, think about it in the style of Greek philosophy. So they sitting around and talking about the things that you love and the things that you do, and just gaining some insight from others. So that's what we're going to do today. The do-it-yourself culture in our packet, hopefully you've read the packet and gone through the links in that packet. Do-it-yourself does stand for DIY stands for do-it-yourself, but closer to home explanation is the direct-it-yourself funeral or the design-it-yourself memorialization. And so our big question today is, what does this have to do with the memorialization industry, the monument industry? And so we want to answer that question. And I think that the overall answer is going to be influence, but let's discuss how and why within that. The motivation behind DIY trends are varied. Some people are drawn to cost-saving benefits of doing things themselves, and others enjoy the creative outlet and sense of accomplishment. So the very first link that we had was from a website that said that told us about necessity versus trend for do-it-yourself. So today I want to dive into starting with that. That little article told us that DIY became an art trend in the 1970s.
One second.
Counterculture. And it was a movement to embrace individualism. So, and we love that, right? As a memorialist, the individualism is, important to our memorialization. Over the last 50 years in the death care industry, cremation has become popular in the 1980s, and then green burial started its rise in about 2005. Funerals, however, largely have remained the same. So in the very first section of our booklet, the Who is Influencing, we learned about the National Home Funeral Alliance, Sacred Death Care, and other death doula type offerings that are out there, and then also dove just a little bit into what maybe some funeral directors, the ICCFA, or just what was on the internet. If you did any of your own research beyond the links that I provided, there was a really great article on how to be your own funeral director in there too. So So our questions, as we start through who is influencing us, start off by asking the question, with the National Home Funeral Alliance adding a database state by state. So the question is, have you ever looked into the rules and regulations in your state for home burial, do it yourself, funerals, anything like that? So let me see if I can see the chat. Has anyone had any experience with looking up those regulations for anything in particular, for any reason?
Oh, okay. Then I will speak.
I haven't, but I thought they were interesting. I have two licensed funeral directors on staff, and we were looking at these, and I think they were a little surprised at some of the regulations in some states, and they brought up an interesting concern of, you know, these DIY funerals and the embalming concerns and that kind of thing with the spread of disease. So I thought it was really interesting. I have no further opinion on it, but it was fascinating.
Yeah, I thought so too, Allison. I thought they were so wildly different from each other. I thought there was a lot more consistency, and when I started looking through that document, I was quite surprised. What about the question of, are there any death doulas in your town? Has anyone encountered death doulas or even worked with one?
I had never even heard of a death doula until a conversation I think I had with you, Christine, at one point a couple months ago. I didn't, that sounded very far-fetched to me, to be honest. Like, I don't know. It kind of blows my mind to think that, but then we have like, what are they, like, when people go on hospice or something, and they sort of walk them through those end of life stages. And maybe somebody could shed some light for me, because I didn't get to dive too deep into what a death doula will help you with, but maybe you could just shed a little bit more light on that for me.
I understood them to be more like kind of like birthing doulas, but with death, like getting a death plan together and like understanding your wishes for how you want this to go. Of course, we all know nothing goes as you ever plan it to, but that's how I understood the death doula.
Yeah, it's definitely more on the spiritual end of things. I was telling a friend who is a hospice worker about we have 3 death doulas in our town, full on like businesses. And I was telling a hospice worker about them, and she was slightly offended. She was like, but that's what I do. You know, I have the education to help people through the death process. And so for her, the argument was, well, how are these people educated? But when you dive a little bit farther into the idea of doula, it's, as Allison said, when you think of a birth doula, it's somebody who is there to help, you know, get that life, that new baby into this world. And a death doula does the opposite. They help your spirit, your soul, your family, you know, understand the process of death itself, and to be right there with you as it happens. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, this is the first time I'm hearing the term as well. Is it kind of like a link between hospice and the funeral home? Is sort of the role that they're filling in a way?
I would say no, Brad, because so far it looks like hospice isn't working with death doulas, and funeral homes aren't really working. There's a bit of a disconnect, which is part of our conversation here. You know, we're finding that the consumers are being influenced by these people, and yet for us, the death doula ends at death and does not continue on with helping them with memorialization, which I think is interesting, because all of their work revolves around ceremony and ritual. I think memorialization and cemetery use is also ceremonial and ritual for many people. All of this is going to depend on your culture, your geographical location, you know, what's popular. So, you know, maybe death doulas aren't anywhere, but they certainly are on the rise in Michigan.
Olive has a question, has her hand raised.
Hey, so from what I've learned with death doulas is that they do stick around post-mortem and kind of help the family and the friends with the process. It was something I was interested in post-college for a little bit. And that was one of the bigger things for me is sticking around through the grieving process to kind of guide through that, which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah, I agree, Olive. I think it's fascinating too. I think it's so far away from traditional funeral home business. And for us, I'm probably getting ahead of myself, but for us around here, we have so many people skipping the funeral home altogether. Although with Michigan law, you have to have a funeral director for transport and things like that. So there are some legal reasons for that. As much as possible, people are skipping funeral homes for the rest of it. Well, we could move on and just, how many of us have planned a funeral for our loved one? Show of hands. Anybody have to do that for a loved one? Okay, all right. And then there's a level, how involved were you with the funeral home, or how much did you do it yourself? So do you have your own do-it-yourself experience? Okay, great start. It's really just the beginning of the conversation. So thinking about it is where we're at. So
Christine,
yeah.
I just wanted to say that when my dad passed away about 5 years ago, and we had asked the funeral home, like my dad had very specific wishes, and so he was wanting to be cremated. And of course, this was like the closest family member for me that had passed away that I was involved with any of the planning or anything, and all of this happened very quickly. And so we kind of made decisions on the fly, except for the things that my dad had very much specified, because we were trying to exclude the family drama, and the quicker we did things, the less they were involved with a lot of that. And so one of the things that kind of surprised me was we didn't have to have my father embalmed, and we also didn't get a casket, but it wasn't an open viewing, but his body was there. And I know that sounds very weird, but my dad had kind of made a joke when we were young kids that he just wanted to be tossed in a hole and left to just go back to nature the way God intended things. And we didn't feel comfortable with that. So then he said, fine, you can get me a cardboard box. And so that's what we did. And as crazy as it sounds, they allowed that, but it surprised me because the cremation process kind of intrigues me in and of itself. But I'm wondering, going back to this, like the disconnect that you mentioned, do you think that some of those things become more of a bottom line for a lot of the funeral homes or the companies that are involved, where that's why they don't really intermingle a whole lot, like, too much stepping on toes when it comes to money?
I think there's a trend going on across the country on the importance of memorialization, and I think that is changing. And I hear that a lot. Just throw me in a box. Just throw me in the ground. I don't care what you do with me. And I'm hearing that more and more as I network, as I meet people, and I think that trend is kind of hurting our industry as a whole. And I really think MBNA as a group should address that in a lot of different ways across the country. By the way, I'm Jeff Poirier from Quincy Memorials in Massachusetts. I'm also the president of the Massachusetts Monument Builders Association. So I'm trying to stay in tune with this as much as possible so that we can tackle this, for the longevity of our businesses. So it is a trend I'm seeing, and it's a threat to our industry, in my opinion. That just sparked me.
Yeah, no, that's great, Jeff. I think that you will find the majority of us feel that way, and that's exactly why we want to have discussions like this one.
Mhm.
Yeah, we're all sick of the just cremate me end of conversation, as if burial and cremation are mutually exclusive, and it's not true. And I know we do things to combat that too. So, so let's move on to the how-to. The how-to page, I just had two simple links there. One was for do-it-yourself memorial services. And it was just somebody's guide, super simple. But if somebody's looking for information, I mean, that was a first page, #1 Google search. Oh, here's 10 steps on how to create your own memorial service. And then the next one was the Pinterest board for do-it-yourself, which I thought was fantastic. I mean, if I wanted to do something myself, there was something on everything from, how to pay to how to pray. It was fantastic information in there. So, what do you think is what I want to know. What do you think about the do-it-yourself instructions that are out there? And as Jeff pointed out, are they helpful to the memorial industry?
But the size on that will be the correct size. But I just wanna
And
make sure
again, this is just opinion, if there's somebody looking at do-it-yourself stuff, is it helpful to the monument industry? Allison?
I kind of feel like it is. I mean, we're talking about DIY memorial services. So obviously, they've cremated some time ago and they're dealing with those emotions and they're realizing that, hey, it's important to me after all that I do something to honor them. Like I have that need, this emotional need. So I feel like as people realize there's a need to honor and remember, they may feel as though the only option is DIY. I think a lot of people don't realize that you can go back to a funeral home, well after a death to have them assist with services. So, it may be just lack of education on what options are, but I think it's good that they have this realization that they need to honor and remember. The trick is just tacking on to that need and getting them to understand that, honoring and remembering once is one thing, but honoring and remembering forever is a whole other.
I just say amen, and we'll just end the conversation right there. We all agree, I'm sure. And I think
I actually have a question about Pinterest because people go there for information. And has anyone conquered Pinterest or gotten a following or tried Pinterest to, put out some professional information instead of, the amateur information that it seems to be out there?
Yes, so we have actually recently been getting into Pinterest. We just realized that people can send you direct messages, which is something we should have noticed earlier. So we have a decent following. Our stuff kind of floats around on Pinterest regularly. And so now I'm kind of backtracking and answering questions that I did not answer earlier.
So with the following you have on Pinterest, are they local people that could become customers? Because Pinterest doesn't really let you geo-target to my knowledge. Are you getting people all over the country just asking you random questions, or are you getting actual leads?
So we do monuments all over the country as personally. So we are getting actual positive responses where they do go to our website. They do kind of follow up from there. And then we have people who are like, oh, like can you ship to Australia? How much would that cost? And it's like, no, baby, we can't do that. So it's kind of a mix up, and it usually results in people who at least visit our website.
yeah, thanks, Olive. Andrew, I'll answer too, in that we've had a Pinterest page for quite a long time. I have ebbed and flowed with it. Sometimes I pay attention and sometimes I don't. I think that they do have some great analytics, but the reason that I use it is so that I can brand my graphics. So let's say I've got an entire board on symbolism branded, and each one of those has a link back to my website. And then I can take a link to my Pinterest page and put it on our social media. And so the information that they're finding on Pinterest came from me as well as what they found on the website. So that's the way that I use Pinterest.
I'm just curious as to, I'm sorry, hi, my name's Maggie. I work for Longstreth Memorials as a designer. I'm curious to know, what all types of social media marketing do your companies do? And do you find that you're getting some positive, basically driving customers to your businesses through that? And if so, which venues do you find are most profitable in that?
Mhm. Maggie, I would love it if everybody would take the time to write down like the 2 or 3 social medias that you're using most often. Just because that's a huge topic, and I think we're going to veer off in our time frame for that. So I appreciate the question. So if everybody would just kind of type into the chat what you're using so that we can see. And then I want to move on to our second question here, is that should a monument builder include education on DIY services, which include memorialization, on their website? So are you giving out information on any sort of DIY services on your website? That's a no. It sounds like nobody's doing that. I'm not surprised. I was just curious, Jeff.
Yeah, our website is geared towards education, giving people knowledge on the steps to produce a memorial. In Massachusetts, funeral homes, cemeteries, and monument companies are separate. So we have those laws. So obviously not all of you have that. So we have an opportunity here, but doesn't mean that it's a better opportunity. We still find that disconnect between funeral homes and cemeteries, mainly funeral homes still. But what we try to gear our website towards is educating and following a step-by-step approach to designing their own memorial.
Yeah.
Thinking about all the pieces and putting it together in the end.
Yeah, and kind of staying in our own lane, which doesn't, sounds like the lanes are kind of separate for you. For maybe, I know for me and maybe more of us, that the lanes definitely cross over and back and forth a few times. So it's a little tough. Let me ask you this though, like if you were going to add something, if you know people are looking for DIY information on memorial services, and we'll get into this delayed, as Allison mentioned earlier, delayed services, would it be to your benefit to have a little bit of information, at least from an SEO standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I've been told YouTube videos are one of the best things to produce for the SEO portion of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
A lot of hints, and people can watch a 3-4 minute video
mm-hmm.
to do it yourself.
Okay.
A question for Jeffrey, if that's okay.
Sure.
It's
okay with Jeff.
What do your YouTube videos consist of? Is it you making the monument, you designing it and producing it and etching it, that type of thing, to like show how the process goes? Or is it just you showing what you have, or interviewing, your staff? How
I'll
what
be
are,
honest,
what do you what do they consist of?
Yeah, I'll be honest.
Sorry.
We don't have them well put together. We're kind of in the process. But all the above there, creating short videos, to show the culture of your company, to show the memorial design process, to show the manufacturing process, because all that can help you in your sales process, like show people, yeah, this isn't an easy process. It's actually pretty complicated. There's a lot of pieces to it. There's a lot that can go wrong. So it kind of puts things in perspective to the consumer. on, and we try to build that into our presentation. And we're trying to put that together in a good video form, which MBNA has put together some good videos that shows some of those. But it's good to kind of build your own and release those videos, try to get some likes, some shares, and make sure you use the proper keywords so when people are searching the terms, they'll stumble across the videos and hopefully go directly to your website.
Yeah. And I like that because per Maggie's question, you know, I'm looking at the chat and nobody's putting down YouTube as a form of
Right.
social media. And it's definitely something that that is, you know, a trend. I mean, YouTube is where most of the DIY, you know, information comes from, right? You've got, listen, I found a DIY monument setting YouTube video during the process of research. This guy showed from start to finish a 2-piece, you know, standard monument with setting compound and everything. Explained it was a half an hour video, and he was right, but he's encouraging people to do it themselves. Why? Because people are buying online without a monument builder, and so there's a need for it.
Yeah, I was impressed when I looked at the Etsy link that you sent, and I'm seeing setting compound. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, people are crazy.
Yeah. And for us, it's because the cemeteries are refusing to set them.
Yeah.
Is that anybody else's experience? Hearing from cemeteries that say we don't want them and we're not setting them, and now it's the family's job because the monument companies are also saying no?
Yeah, that's becoming popular in Massachusetts. We're refusing to set them. And also the cemeteries are like, you know, we keep having problems with it. So we're going to make a rule and regulation that says that we don't even allow monuments to come from places that don't have a physical shop even.
Wow.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
so some cemeteries are thinking about those types of things.
I think if we can work with cemeteries, I mean, that brings up a topic of working with cemeteries to, you know, kind of make sure that they have that in mind if they haven't already been running into that issue, that they start putting that type of thing into their bylaws, and that way, then when you know, when it comes to the point of consumers coming in with these monuments that they don't have anybody to set them, you know, that will really help to curb that and help our industry, you know. So I mean, I don't know if have any of you guys kind of gone on um, an attempt to work with cemeteries to influence them in making those kinds of statements in their rules and regulations for their consumers.
I personally have. One of my titles is cemetery liaison. We take it very seriously to educate cemeteries, help rewrite ordinances, educate them on granites, even foundations and things like that. So you're barking up my tree, Maggie. I love that. My passion is cemeteries.
No, I agree that liaison is important. And I mean, our biggest struggle in our area is developing those relationships.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of people have external setters in our area, and some people have internal. So the ones that the setting crews actually develop the best relationships with the cemeteries, because they're interacting with the people every time they go into the cemetery. You know, the salespeople aren't interacting with the cemetery as much, but they're the ones that have the initial relationship with the customer. And it's hard for the salespeople to develop those relationships because they're not in and out of the cemetery doing the work. You know, that's what I'm finding here in Massachusetts, at least.
Yeah. And so then speaking of cemeteries, and tying that in with delayed services, you know, cemeteries are finding, for me, this is my experience, that people are coming to them who have skipped the funeral home and now want to do a service. And that service is very often right in the cemetery graveside. And there's no one to guide them. And so I have found that cemeteries are now trying to deal with the DIY culture of burial and memorialization, you know, with just that family. My question on that page for delayed services and green burial is, do you think that the monument industry is losing sales because of either delayed or green burials?
I think they're losing sales, or maybe they're delayed sales, I don't know, but we definitely see a drop when you watch the obituaries and it's families having a service at a later time, or even with cremations, people are not as receptive. I don't need a memorial. Or I can just make my own, it's fine. Now, there are some cemeteries around here that they require, like what Jeffrey was saying, they require the monument builder to be involved, or it has to be granite, it has to be certain material. Some of them are getting away with making their own things for quite some time, and then they'll come to us, we've been doing this for 3 years and nobody complained, and now all of a sudden our stuff is just missing off of the grave and we're so upset. And we're like, okay, well, what can we help you with, you know? So I think that we're losing some sales, just because I think it kind of goes back to educating, where Allison had mentioned, educating people that remember is for forever part, not just the immediate of the need right now.
I think, and adding on to what you were saying, the loss of sales is absolutely there. Because with cremation, a lot of times what we see is they'll bury someone's ashes in a plot with someone else already at the cemetery, and they already have a headstone. So it forces you to be really creative on how to, make a really good sale for a flat marker that's going at the foot of the grave, or adding text to an existing memorial, or whatever it is you're going to do. So I think there's that, at least an opportunity cost there, whereas you could have sold a monument, an upright. Now you're having to get really creative on how to get that same revenue in a different way.
It's definitely forced us to, with size regulations, selling more tall monuments, if a cemetery will allow that, many more names on one marker. And I think too that sometimes we talk to people about when they come in and tell us that it's going to be cremation in the future, there's going to be, the cemetery allows up to 6 in one grave. I think that the idea is still the same as in, way back when a lot was sold. There was a family lot, it was 12 graves. Now it's a family grave. I think that that's affecting, people before they even come to us also, just coming up with their own solutions.
And some people are choosing cremation or green burials for the simple tagline that is associated with that, because they're less expensive than, presuming, because I have only, again, helped with stuff on one, but even my parents, they say, we just want to be cremated, we don't want anything blah blah blah, because we don't want to spend the money. So my sisters and I are kind of under the, well, when mom dies, she doesn't get to decide, so we're going to put up a monument, and I don't know, they can come haunt us, that's fine, but they shouldn't be forgotten down the road because they don't want to be remembered. So I think that the sales are also lost because people just don't want to spend the money, because they didn't want to spend the money on anything.
Yeah, it kind of comes back around to just the initial, digging into the subject of, is it trend or necessity? Where did that come from for your parents?
They
It's
were
not
poor.
necessity. It
No,
wasn't.
they grew up very poor, and truthfully, I mean, I think that they just never really had anything of substance in their mind. Like my dad would never have a dollar, but he'd give you the shirt off his back. And so like for him, he just would think that that's just a waste. If you had several $1,000s to spend, then why are you going to spend it on me when I'm dead, when you could help your kid get a car? That's my dad's mentality, and my mom will just follow suit.
So the question was, is the monument industry losing sales due to either of these? And I posted I gave you a pros and cons video. And if you watched that woman was quite pro burial / cemetery. And then she also has some really great videos on why someone should be using the cemetery and not just tossing the cremains. And so I thought that was, great to see someone finally that I found suggesting, that delayed services, should actually involve memorialization. But what I didn't find was a monument company that was making any suggestions of memorialization for delayed services. Again, I already mentioned that. I did find lots of websites that talk about pre-need, that do great jobs of education, that, do have videos. I mean, we've got great monument companies all over the US. Great websites, and lots of good information out there. And so I just want to stretch everybody's brains a little bit and say, do we need to expand what education we're putting out there a little bit? Our next page was on online purchasing and online design. The do-it-yourself culture implies that anything can be done without a professional. Online shopping is the normal, right? It doesn't seem weird to buy something online anymore. It kind of implies that it's okay to buy a monument online too. Like your groceries got there pretty safely. Your medicine got at your house pretty safely. It just doesn't feel to the consumer like that big of a deal, I think. Etsy, that link to Etsy, I mean, that really reinforced that. Online design is offered by local monument companies and online sales only monument companies. And so that's very normal to see online design. So our question is, are we utilizing online design? And do you think that online design helps or hurts the monument industry?
We personally are not using online design, and I think for the most part, it's not only hurting the monument industry, it's hurting society, that people aren't meeting people face to face as much anymore. So it's a society type of problem where people are just glued to their screens. I know I am every day. I'm for work. I have 3 monitors going, trying to manage the company, and it's constantly utilizing technology. But with online design, it's going to minimize the creativity in our industry, because you can only do so much with the online design anyway. It's cut and paste, simple designs, flat carvings, stuff like that, not much texture. So it will reduce the amount of creativity in our industry, in my opinion.
I had a question. If anyone's actually working with some of these online mass distributors to set stones, and it sounded like, most people were trying to work to, you know, essentially regulate them out of the industry. But I mean, I think there's a market trend here that people are doing this. And is there a way to, make it profitable? Or uh, if they hear the cost that you quote them to set a stone they bought online, they're just going to go back online and buy setting compound and go do it themselves? Or have people experienced that?
I don't find that the customers are trying to do it themselves. They don't have the equipment to move the monuments, or to accept them, or they don't realize how heavy it actually is.
I mean, some of these ones you buy online are, essentially countertop material that, yeah, they 2 guys could move it. So those are kind of the ones, and they can ship it. I mean, FedEx will ship it, or I don't know if these come on a pallet or how they come, but you can buy them online. So those are the ones that those people that are buying them online, how are they getting them set? And is there some way to, make some money there? Because they took, you're not selling the stone, you're not selling the design, you're not selling the manufacturing, you're not manufacturing it. So all you have left is the setting. And is there enough money to be made there?
I think there's a lot of liability in it, because you're handling someone else's product. And if something goes wrong, who's to blame? If it's not the right size or the regulation, they're gonna blame someone. Or if there's a crack or something wrong with it, hopefully the customer will go to the online company, but very rarely will they even fix the problem.
And back to the online designing, we don't do online designing at the moment. I was wondering if anybody else did. Though we have people that will bring in images. Sometimes they're images from another company. Sometimes they're images they created themselves somehow with some sort of online software, usually SERP-TOPS and that sort of thing. So that they'll bring in some sort of ideas. And I wonder, I am curious as to, would it be beneficial for people to be able to do a little bit of something on our own websites, something that would drive them to our own websites to kind of mess around just a little bit so that they can get ideas of things that they like. But I know most of the people, when they come in and when we go through the full sales presentation where we're asking all kinds of questions about their loved ones, and oftentimes they'll go, "Oh, I didn't even think about that. I'm so glad you asked that," or they find a lot of value in working with our sales staff or our designers. So, I mean, I think that online designing, I think the reason people choose things like this is convenience, and probably more so than the creative process is more of I'm trying to get some understanding. Most people have never had to do a monument before. It's first time. They're just working with whatever they've seen. They're not even sure what they want. So many people will come in and not really know even what they want. So to design it themselves would be kind of a difficult process. But at the same time, coming in and knowing nothing about the product can be something that's very unsettling for families. So how do you give them a little opportunity to maybe work a little bit with their design with keeping them still coming into you for the finished product, the professional input?
I love it, Maggie. You're suggesting that we control our own conversations, that we provide the information that people need.
Exactly.
And if people I mean, I don't know how many of you are pre-internet, but how many of us have, waited on someone who walked in with a piece of paper and they drew something. And then maybe we hand drew something. It's not a leap, you guys.
I've had people bring me cut and paste things, like they just find things, it's like a 8.5, 11 sheet of paper, and they've cut out, like a collage that they made in school. And they say, I had one lady in particular, her son had passed away, and she said, it doesn't all have to be here, but this was enough to tell you something. And I was like, perfect, thank you so much. You're right. We probably aren't going to fit all this on there, but we can definitely use this to create something that says who he is with the information that we have. And that pleased her. And I think it gave her some buy-in to what she was doing. We do encourage our customers to have a lot of say in what goes into their design. And a lot of times in the beginning of the conversation, we talk to them and ask, like, okay, do you just want roses, or is there a specific rose that you're looking for? Or, and kind of gauge where they're at. There's some that are like, I just want it to do XYZ. And then you kind of have full control over presenting something to them, and then they can make some adjustments. And then there's other people that will say, I want it exactly this. I want this in the left and this in the right, and these 3 words right here. And with those people, sometimes you can try to introduce them to new ideas, but some of them are very walled off and they don't want to hear it. And so with that, sometimes it's not beneficial to try to crack that, I don't feel. And as you get to know your customers, you can kind of gauge where your line can be drawn, as far as how much you can push and get away with. Sometimes offering them exactly what they've asked for is the best thing, because they'll see that doesn't look as good as how you can present the ideas in a better way. And that's our job, is to give them the best idea, more concise and in more artistic fashion.
I say for us, the majority of people are bringing in a picture because it's just what they've seen and they like it. My first question is always, what about it do you like? So if we could start breaking it down, that I'm not interested in copying somebody else's art, but I want to know what that family likes about that and how I can create something from what they like. But they literally are searching the internet. So whoever has the best SEO, guess who they're getting it from? You know, those of us who really put stuff out there. I get stuff all the time from every state that we don't do markers in. We personally don't ship past the 2 states that we have locations in, you know. But because we have a great website, we get tons of inquiries. So my stuff is probably coming to your office. Your office might be coming, your stuff might be coming to my office. And we work together to say, okay, great. That's the online design, is you finding these and then copying, pasting them and, you know, trying to get me to match that. So that's online design too, you know. Olive, did you have something you wanted to say, Liv?
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly mention that when folks come in with other people's designs, you also run into the risk of copyright infringement, and that can get super messy. And so we encourage folks to tweak it. How can we tweak this for you so it's not another company's art? Right. So it's right. So it's still ours. It's still what they're thinking, but it's our artwork that we designed for them.
All right, well, we're gonna get ready to wrap up with our last section. And we have answered this question in a whole bunch of different ways already throughout this and you know, throughout this forum. How do we participate? How are we going to participate now? We know how we've been. We're talking about how we've been participating, and I'm afraid of being the last person to give my family the information that they need. I want to be out in front. I want the monument industry, I want MBNA to be out in front of this. And so the question for us is, it's just going to continue to rise. You guys have heard of the good death trend? You can look it up. There's a trend on the good death, right? The good memorialization, all of that, all of these increasing conversations and awareness that are out there, the desire to skip the funeral home, these people who want to make their own decisions or want to have more of a hands-on, you know, more hands-on in the process of even designing the memorial. How do we get out in front of that? And so my very last question for us was just a statement: to continue to be seen as the expert that consumers need, we need to adjust how we sell, where we sell, and fully educate and support people in our services. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree for the most part. I think the 2 most important things for us is what I said at the beginning, is voicing out the importance of memorialization, the longstanding tradition of it, and also focusing on advanced planning, pre-need advanced planning, to get ahead of it so that people can actually design their own monument instead of having their family do it for them. They can actually think about their lives in a more positive way, but you have to kind of convince people of that.
Mhm.
And it's about the importance of memorialization, respecting the life they lived, and putting that on a permanent structure that's gonna be on this planet. So
How do we become part of the next conversation of delayed services? I like the idea of more cemetery involvement. Because the cemetery is going to deal with these people for the burial part of it and ask them about creating their own services. What if we have a brochure, you know, at the township, that mentions all of it?
I kind of feel like at that point in the conversation, you have to really understand your target market and how they communicate, why they think the way they think, why they do the things they do. So I feel like that's going to look different for every single market that you serve.
That's a great point.
I got a quick question here. Has anyone participated in like a after retirement type fair? That sounds kind of weird. But a county next to us does something similar, which I'm trying to get my foot in the door of. But it's all like estate planning lawyers, funeral homes are involved in it. Basically just giving out information to these older generations, people that are looking for their parents, things like that. I think that there's some like retirement homes that participate and stuff like that. Is anyone involved in anything like that in their area?
in our area, it's mostly funeral directors are doing that for the advanced planning side of things. But in Massachusetts, they're not talking about the monument, really. They're forgetting about that. They're not making money off it, so they don't even talk about it. So that's why we have to get into, that's why developing those relationships is important, because they need to start talking about it and giving them information. Because that's where people are going to hear it first, is the funeral home. When they're doing advanced planning, or the estate planning attorney, when they're trying to get their affairs in order. You know, people are realizing that they've gone through it with their parents, how difficult it is, all the decisions they need to make in a short amount of time, how stressful it is. I don't want that burden on my children. So I'm getting that more and more. So I think that the more people talk about that, the better. Just like any type of marketing campaign, you got to get the word out and people have to start talking about it. It's got to become a conversation.
Abby, do you think that an expo or a fair or something like that would be a good place to connect the dots of, hey, you're thinking about all this DIY things? This is what we can do to help you DIY your monument.
Yeah, so that's kind of where my brain train went a few weeks ago, and I was like typing this email to our city event planner, and I was like, before I hit send, I was like, do I really want to open this can of worms? Do I really this can of worms? Because you just don't know how's that going to go. And then are they going to rail me in to just start doing something that I'm really not, my plate isn't big enough for at this point. And so she actually emailed me back and she said, we're not doing anything like that right now, but this definitely sounds like something our community might be open to. Let's chat about it. And I said, okay, well, since you're not doing it, I want to do some research before I give you a presentation, because I certainly would want to come informed and prepared and not looking like an idiot who just pulled some things out of a hat and said, hey, let's throw this together. I mean, it's not a kid's birthday party. So right now I'm just in the wheelhouse part of it, but yeah, I think that that there's a lot of disconnect, and to the point of educating the consumers, if you Google, you know, I'm not organically coming to a monument, like I'm just not, and so I think educating the client, you know, we've had people call, can you set this? Can you, I had a guy come in here yesterday. Can you cut the marble off the top of our coffee table and use that as our monument? I kid you not, I'm not making it up. I couldn't answer him. I did answer him, and then he was very pressing. I was like, bring me pictures and measurements. we're not going to do that for him. I don't think like it's going to cost him more to do that than it is for us to sell him a marker. It's not the best choice. And so the education is going to come in and we'll be able to educate him and hopefully he'll make a good decision. But
So
they all want something different.
with your topic of whether or not we've been in an expo sort of situation, we've never done that, though we have done presentations that we created a presentation that we could take around to say Lions clubs and things like that have to have somebody that comes and speaks, which is a good way of getting your information out. I did do the presentation at like a couple of like the senior center type things. Found that was too many of those people had already planned, either because a spouse had already passed or they pre-planned. So I think it's just finding that right age bracket of people to present to is very important. I like the idea of something where you're coming together as a death care industry. I think that's a really neat idea. I think you might get into where you're stepping on each other's toes, so to speak, to some degree, because you're going to have some funeral homes that are selling monuments, and and they might not want to be sitting in a booth next to you who's selling monuments. So you might run into some issues of getting people on board. But if we could all look at it as an opportunity to reach our communities and get the idea of pre-planning out there, I mean, it may be a good method of doing so. We're talking about this online culture though, and everything's kind of moving that direction. So I don't know how long would something like an in-person expo be beneficial, so to speak. Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't, because I don't know if you've actually been to something like that or have seen, really good, what's the word I'm looking, attendance in something in that situation. And neat idea though. I like the idea.
Well, I think
Okay.
Allison said, knowing your target market is important in that, if you're
Yeah.
going to do that.
Yeah. All right, well, we're at time, so we're gonna start wrapping this up. I would just finish, I think, off by saying I kind of think we're at a place where as the experts in the industry, that we have to kind of make a choice. The choice right now is to either just let people come to us and try to dictate maybe how things are gonna happen. Or, we can be a little bit proactive and help ourselves out. So, just my favorite saying is just because we've always done something one way doesn't mean we have to keep doing it that way. So, great discussion, you guys. Thank you so much for all of your input, your ideas, and just being here to hang out with one another. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you so much, Christine, and for everyone that participated today. I know this takes away from your working hours, but it does make us better memorialists, and that's important. Please note that this webinar does count for 1 hour of a CM credit. You can learn more about the CM program at our monumentbuilders.org. Click on About MBNA and then select Certified Memorialist Program. I don't know how many are here that are already certified, but goals. And then also, if you're not already doing so, I encourage you to find the WinMBNA page on Facebook, request to join, and then you can know about our future upcoming events as well. We have a lot planned. So thank you again for coming. We really appreciate your time and energy that you've put into this. And I think everybody has given some really great feedback. And thanks again, Christine, for all your research.
Yep.
Appreciate you.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day.
Thank you.